This is HOA violation vault. And the timeline is absurd. You are making my case for me. That is what I said when Karen marched into the lobby yelling that my appeal was late, even though I had just received the notice. She slammed a clipboard on the counter and jabbed her finger at a date circled in red marker. The management clerk looked up from her desk with wide eyes. Karen kept going, her voice climbing. She said I had 5 business days to respond, and today was day 6. I pulled the envelope out of my jacket pocket and held it up. The postmark was 4 days ago. The notice inside was dated 2 weeks earlier. Karen froze mid-sentence, her mouth still open. Then she recovered and said the postmark did not matter because the policy clock started when they generated the notice, not when I received it. The clerk glanced between us and said nothing. I work as a financial analyst, and I track every HOA fee, every deadline, every line item. This was not the first time something felt off in Cypress Point Association, but it was the first time it pointed straight at me. We live in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a neighborhood where the board uses vendors as muscle and pretends it is policy. The HOA name shows up on signs at every turn, but the real power sits with Gloria Clark, the rules interpretation chair who claims she wrote the covenants. She carries a ring binder full of highlighted rules she calls the standard, and she waves it like a weapon whenever someone questions her. I share the car with a family member, and a tow would strand both of us. That is what was on the line. Gloria stood there in her purple light jacket with the hood up and a white visor, holding her bright phone case like a badge, and she repeated her line. She said the appeal deadline was firm and I had missed it by a full day. I asked her to explain how I could appeal something I received yesterday. She said I should have checked my portal. I told her I checked the portal every morning and there was no notice until it showed up in the mail. She smiled and said that was my problem, not hers. The clerk finally spoke. She said she could pull the portal upload log if that would help. Gloria cut her off and said the log would not change the rules. She turned back to me and said I could file a new appeal with a late fee, or I could accept the fine and move on. I asked what the fine was for. She flipped the clipboard around and tapped a line. Unauthorized parking in a guest spot. I do not park in guest spots. I park in my assigned space every single night. She said a photo was taken 3 weeks ago showing my car in guest 3. I asked to see the photo. She said it was in the file, and I could request it through the records process. I asked how long that would take. She said 10 business days. I asked how I was supposed to appeal a violation I had not seen proof of within a deadline that had already passed. She leaned in close, her voice dropping. She said, I will make an example out of you so everyone learns. Then she added, we can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works. I let that sit for a second. The clerk shifted in her seat. Gloria smiled and started to turn away. I said I wanted to see the complaint file. She said it was not available for walk-in review. I said the bylaws allowed residents to inspect enforcement records with 24 hours notice. She said that applied to board records, not individual complaints. I said the complaint was the basis for the fine, so it was part of the enforcement record. She said I could submit a written request. I pulled out my phone and opened a notes app. I said I was submitting the request verbally right now, and I would follow up in writing within the hour. She said verbal requests were not valid. I said the bylaws did not specify written only for inspection requests. She said she would check with the board attorney. I said that was fine, and I would wait. She said the attorney was not available today. I said I would wait until tomorrow. She turned to the clerk and said to mark the appeal as rejected for lateness and close the file. The clerk hesitated. Gloria raised her voice. She said, close it. The clerk clicked something on her screen and nodded. Gloria walked out without another word. I stood there staring at the closed door. The clerk exhaled slowly and said she was sorry. I asked her if she could print the portal upload log anyway. She said she was not supposed to without manager approval. I asked when the manager would be in. She said tomorrow morning. I thanked her and left. Outside, the hazy smoke from a grill drifted through the parking lot as neighbors watched. Two of them were whispering and pointing at a tow truck idling near the guest spaces. I walked over and asked the driver what he was doing. He said he had a dispatch order to tow a vehicle from guest 3. I asked to see the order. He showed me a printed slip with no readable text, just a vehicle description and a lot number. It matched my car. I said my car was not in guest 3. He pointed at the guest row. My car was sitting right there. I felt my chest tighten. I had parked in my assigned space last night. I always park in my assigned space. Someone had moved it. I asked the driver to wait. He said he had a schedule. I said I had proof the car was not parked there overnight. He said he did not care about proof, he cared about the dispatch order. I pulled out my phone and opened the doorbell camera app. I scrolled back to last night. The footage showed me pulling into my assigned space at 9:15. I held the phone up. The driver squinted at it and said it did not prove anything because the car could have been moved after that. I scrolled forward. The footage showed the car still in my space at 6 this morning. I fast-forwarded through the morning. At 7:42, a figure in a purple jacket walked up to my car, got in with a key, and drove it to the guest row. I paused the video. The driver leaned in. He said that was messed up. I asked if he still planned to tow. He said he would call dispatch and ask. He stepped away and made the call. I watched him nod and shake his head a few times. He came back and said dispatch told him to proceed, unless I had a police report. I asked why I would need a police report for my own car. He said because someone else moved it, and that made it a possible theft situation. I said it was not theft, it was harassment. He said he was just the tow guy, and he did not make the rules. He climbed into the cab. I called the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher said they could send an officer, but it might take an hour. I said that was fine. The tow driver started hooking up the car. I told him the police were on the way. He said he would be gone in 5 minutes. I stepped in front of the truck. He honked. I did not move. He honked again. A neighbor shouted something. The driver rolled down the window and said I was going to get myself arrested. I said I was waiting for the police. He said he was calling them too. He pulled out his phone and dialed. A few minutes later, a sheriff deputy arrived. The deputy asked what was going on. The driver explained the dispatch order. I explained the doorbell footage. The deputy asked to see it. I showed him the video. He watched the whole thing. Then he looked at the driver and said, "You are not towing this car." The driver said he had an order. The deputy said the order was based on a false report, and if he proceeded it would be theft. The driver called dispatch again. This time the conversation was longer. He hung up and unhooked the car. He said dispatch was canceling the order and he was leaving. The deputy asked me if I wanted to file a report. I said yes. The deputy took my information and wrote up a report. He said it looked like someone with access to my car had moved it to create a violation. I told him about the HOA notice and the appeal deadline. He said that sounded like a setup. I asked if he could talk to Gloria. He said he could try, but HOA disputes were usually civil matters unless there was clear criminal intent. I said moving my car without permission was criminal. He said technically it was if I did not give anyone a key. I said I did not. He asked if anyone else had access. I said my family member had a key, but they were out of town. He wrote that down. He said he would follow up, and if I had more evidence I should bring it. I thanked him and he left. The tow driver was already gone. My car sat in the guest space with the hook marks still on the undercarriage. I moved it back to my assigned spot and locked it. Then I sat in the driver's seat and pulled up the HOA portal on my phone. The violation notice was there now. It had been uploaded 2 hours ago, long after the supposed deadline. I took a screenshot. I scrolled through the rest of the portal. There were 3 other violations in my account history, all marked resolved, all dated months ago. I did not remember getting any of those. I clicked on the first one, trash cans visible from street. I always roll my cans back the same day. The second one was lawn edging not maintained. I edge every 2 weeks. The third was holiday decorations up past deadline. I do not put up decorations. Someone was padding my file. I clicked on the complaint attachments. All 3 were marked photo evidence on file, but the photos were not uploaded. I took more screenshots. Then I opened the community message board. There was a new post from Gloria. It said, "Reminder that repeat violators will face escalated enforcement including towing and amenity bans. Be a good neighbor and follow the rules." It was posted 20 minutes ago. I scrolled through the replies. Most were supportive. One person said, "Some people just do not care about property values." Another said, "If you do not like the rules, move." A third said, "The board is doing a great job keeping standards high." I felt my face get hot. I closed the app and opened my email. I drafted a records request. I asked for all complaint files in my name, all violation notices, all photo evidence, all correspondence between board members regarding my account, and all portal upload logs showing when documents were added. I kept the tone neutral. I cited the relevant bylaw section. I sent it to the management company email and copied Gloria and the board president. Then I sat back and waited. The reply came in less than 10 minutes. It was from Gloria. She said records requests required a 10 business day processing window and a fee of 50 cents per page. She said the request was vague and needed to be resubmitted with specific date ranges and document types. She said the board reserved the right to deny requests that were overly broad or intended to harass staff. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to the deputy with a note. I said this was part of the pattern. If you are enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. I spent the rest of the afternoon digging. I started with the HOA public records on the county website. Every association has to file annual reports and budgets. I pulled the last 3 years. The budgets showed line items for enforcement contractor, legal fees, and management company retainer. The enforcement contractor line had doubled in the last year. I noted the vendor name. Then I checked the meeting minutes archive on the HOA portal. Minutes were supposed to be posted within 30 days of each meeting. The last posted minutes were from 6 months ago. I clicked on the archived years. There were gaps. Some months had no minutes at all. Other months had minutes that looked identical except for the date header. I downloaded everything and opened them side by side in a document viewer. 3 different meetings from different months had the exact same motion text, the same vote counts, and the same typo in the treasurer report. Someone had copied and pasted. I kept digging. I found a forum post from 2 years ago where a former resident complained about a fine for a shed that did not exist. The post said the HOA refused to provide photo evidence and threatened a lien when he did not pay. The thread had 15 replies, most of them from other residents saying they had similar experiences. One person said they paid a bogus fine just to make it go away. Another said they sold their house early because the board was impossible to deal with. A third said they tried to run for the board to fix things, but their nomination packet was rejected for a technicality. The thread ended with a moderator note saying the discussion was closed due to personal attacks. I took screenshots of everything. Then I searched for Gloria Clark. She showed up in meeting minutes going back 4 years. She was listed as Rules Interpretation Chair in every one. Before that, she was Compliance Officer. Before that, she was on the Architectural Review Committee. She had been in a leadership role for 7 years straight. I clicked on the oldest meeting minutes I could find. They were from 8 years ago, right after the HOA switched management companies. The minutes mentioned a financial audit required by the new management contract. The audit summary was attached as a PDF. I opened it. The audit found discrepancies in the reserve fund accounting, missing receipts for contractor payments, and duplicate invoices for legal fees. The summary recommended a full forensic review. The board voted to accept the audit findings and implement better controls. There was no mention of a forensic review in any later minutes. I searched the budget line items again. The reserve fund balance had stayed flat for 3 years, then suddenly jumped by $40,000 in 1 year. The notes said it was due to deferred maintenance savings. That did not make sense. Deferred maintenance meant things were not getting fixed, not that costs went down. I made a note to ask about that. Then I found something else. A complaint file from 3 years ago involving a resident named Hawkins. The file was marked resolved, but the notes were detailed. Hawkins had appealed a towing fee after his car was removed from a guest space. He claimed he was parked legally and had a guest pass displayed. The appeal was denied. Hawkins escalated to the management company. The management company reviewed the case and found that the guest pass system had been changed 2 weeks before the tow, but no notice was sent to residents. The new system required advance registration online. Hawkins did not know about the change. The management company reversed the fine and reimbursed the tow fee. The notes included an internal email from the management supervisor to Gloria. The email said, "This is the 3rd similar case this quarter. Please ensure all policy changes are properly noticed per the bylaws. We cannot keep reversing fines due to communication failures." Gloria replied, "Noted." The email chain ended there. I checked the meeting minutes from that quarter. There was no mention of the guest pass policy change. There was no mention of the management company email. There was no mention of the reversals. I printed everything. I bought a 3-ring binder and a pack of tab dividers. I labeled the tabs: violations, complaints, minutes, budgets, emails, Hawkins case, portal logs. I filled the binder in order. By the time I finished, it was almost midnight. My family member called to check in. I told them what happened. They said Gloria had been a problem for years and nobody could stop her because she controlled the paperwork. I asked what they meant. They said Gloria had a copy of every rule, every form, every template, and every precedent going back to the original covenants. She used it to win arguments and shut people down. If you questioned her, she would pull out the binder and cite chapter and verse until you gave up. I asked if anyone had ever challenged her directly. They said one person tried during an election. Gloria got him disqualified by claiming his nomination form was missing a signature. He had a copy with the signature, but Gloria said the filed copy did not match, and the filed copy was the official record. The board backed her. He gave up. I hung up and stared at the binder on my desk. This was not just about my car. This was a pattern. Gloria had been running the same plays for years, and the board let her do it because she made enforcement look organized. The vendors got paid, the fines got collected, and the record stayed just messy enough that nobody could track it all. I thought about the Hawkins case. I thought about the duplicate meeting minutes. I thought about the missing forensic review. I thought about the reserve fund jump. All of it pointed to one thing. Someone was covering up money that did not add up, and that someone had to be close enough to the books to move it. I opened my laptop and searched for the name of the management company. I found their main office address. It was 20 minutes away. I made a note to visit in the morning. The next day, I went to the management company office at 8 sharp. The lobby was clean and quiet. A receptionist asked how she could help. I said I needed to speak to the regional supervisor about Cypress Point Association. She asked if I had an appointment. I said I did not, but it was urgent. She made a call. A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit came out. He introduced himself as the regional supervisor. I told him I was a resident at Cypress Point and I needed to discuss a pattern of enforcement abuse. He led me to a small conference room. I opened my binder and walked him through everything: the backdated notice, the moved car, the doorbell footage, the portal upload timestamp, the missing photos, the Hawkins case, the duplicate minutes, the missing forensic review, the reserve fund jump. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. He said he remembered the Hawkins case. He said that was part of why they flagged Cypress Point for closer oversight 2 years ago. I asked what that meant. He said they started requiring monthly budget reconciliations and quarterly board audits. I asked if they found anything. He said the audits were clean on paper, but there were delays in getting documents and some records were incomplete. He said Gloria always had an explanation, and the board president always backed her. I asked if they ever pushed harder. He said they tried, but the board could fire the management company at any time, and the contract was up for renewal every 2 years. If they pushed too hard, the board would just switch companies and the new company would not know the history. I said that sounded like a system designed to let abuse continue. He did not disagree. I asked what it would take to force a real audit. He said a formal complaint from a resident with documented evidence, or a board vote to authorize it. I said I had the evidence. He said the complaint had to go through the board first per the bylaws. I said the board would reject it because Gloria controlled the process. He said that was probably true, but if I filed it formally and they rejected it improperly, I could escalate to the state regulatory board or file a civil suit. I asked how long that would take. He said months, maybe a year. I said I did not have that kind of time because Gloria was trying to tow my car and ban me from amenities. He nodded slowly. Then he said, "What if I told you there was a faster way?" I leaned forward. He said the management company had the authority to pause enforcement actions if there was evidence of procedural abuse. It was buried in the contract as a liability protection clause. If they believed a violation was improper, they could flag it and require board review before proceeding. I asked if he could do that for my case. He said he could, but it would only buy me a few weeks, and Gloria would escalate in other ways. I said I would take the time. He said he needed something concrete to justify the pause. I pulled out my phone and showed him the doorbell footage. He watched it twice. Then he said, "That will work." He made a note and said he would send a memo to the board today pausing my violation pending review. He said I should expect Gloria to react. I said I was counting on it. I left the office and drove straight to the HOA clubhouse. There was a board hearing scheduled for that afternoon. If I missed it, they planned a default vote against me. I checked my watch. I had 3 hours. I went home and added the management supervisor memo to the binder. I printed a second copy of the doorbell footage screenshots. I printed the portal upload timestamps. I printed the Hawkins case notes. I printed the duplicate minutes comparison. I printed the email from the management company about communication failures. I organized everything under the tabs. Then I rehearsed. I knew Gloria would try to control the room. I knew she would interrupt. I knew she would cite rules and precedents. I let the meeting move on. Because my move was not a speech, it was a document. I just had to get it on the record. At 2 o'clock, I walked into the clubhouse. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front and rows of folding chairs facing it. About 15 residents were already seated. Gloria sat at the center of the table with the board president on her right and the treasurer on her left. She had her ring binder open in front of her, a stack of printed notices beside it. When I walked in, she looked up and smiled. She said, "Glad you could make it." I sat in the front row. The board president called the meeting to order. He went through the agenda. My case was listed under enforcement actions. 3rd item. I waited. The first 2 items were quick, a landscaping contract renewal and a pool maintenance budget adjustment. Both passed with no discussion. Then the president said, "Next item, enforcement action regarding guest parking violation." Gloria stood up. She said the case was straightforward. A vehicle registered to my address was photographed in a guest space without a valid pass. I was notified per policy. I failed to appeal within the deadline. The fine was upheld. She recommended adding a towing authorization and a 30-day amenity suspension as a deterrent. The president asked if I had anything to say. I stood up and said I did. Gloria said I had waived my right to speak by missing the appeal deadline. I said the management company had paused the enforcement action pending review. Gloria froze. The president asked what I was talking about. I pulled out the memo and handed it to him. He read it and passed it to the treasurer. Gloria snatched it from the treasurer and read it herself. Her face went red. She said the management company did not have the authority to pause board actions. I said the contract gave them that authority for procedural abuse cases. She said there was no abuse. I said I had evidence. She said evidence was not relevant because the appeal deadline had passed. I said the appeal deadline was backdated. I pulled out the envelope with the postmark and held it up. She said the postmark did not matter. I said it did matter because the notice was dated 2 weeks earlier but mailed 4 days ago. I pulled out the portal upload timestamp screenshot. The president leaned forward. I handed him the printout. He studied it. Gloria said the portal timestamp was irrelevant because the notice was generated internally first. I said the bylaws required mailed notice to be sent within 3 business days of generation. I pulled out the bylaw section. Gloria opened her binder and flipped pages. She said the bylaw referred to board meeting notices, not enforcement notices. I said the bylaw section applied to all notices. The president looked at the treasurer. The treasurer shrugged. Gloria slammed her binder shut. She said I was wasting everyone's time with procedural arguments. She said the real issue was that I parked in a guest space. I said I did not park there. She said there was a photo. I said the photo would prove I did not park there if she would release it. She said the photo was in the file and I could request it through the records process. I said I already requested it, and she denied the request. She said the request was overly broad. I pulled out the email chain and handed it to the president. He read it. His face tightened. Gloria said the request was overly broad by definition because it asked for all records. I said I was entitled to all records under the bylaws. She said I was entitled to reasonable access, not unlimited access. I said reasonable access meant I could see the evidence used against me. The president said, "That seems fair." Gloria turned to him. She said, "We have policies for a reason. If we let every resident demand unlimited records, we will spend all our time responding to requests instead of managing the community." The president said, "He is just asking for the photo." Gloria said, "The photo is part of a larger file, and releasing partial files sets a bad precedent." I said, "Then release the whole file." She said, "I will, after the 10 business day processing window and the per-page fee." I said, "The photo was taken 3 weeks ago and used to issue a fine 2 weeks ago, but I only received notice 4 days ago. If the appeal deadline is 5 business days from generation, I had no realistic chance to appeal. That is not a procedural argument, that is a setup." The room went quiet. One of the residents in the back row said, "He has a point." Another said, "I got a late notice last month too." Gloria spun around and said, "This is not a forum for complaints." The president said, "Let him finish." I said, "I have more." I opened the binder to the Hawkins case tab. I pulled out the notes in the management company email. I handed them to the president. I said 3 years ago, a resident named Hawkins was towed under similar circumstances. The management company found that the policy had changed without notice and reversed the fine. They told Gloria to ensure proper notice going forward. She did not. I pulled out the duplicate minutes comparison. I said, "I also found meeting minutes from 3 different months that are identical except for the date. Someone copied and pasted them. That means at least 2 of those meetings either did not happen or did not cover what the minutes claim." I pulled out the reserve fund budget pages. I said, "I also found a $40,000 jump in the reserve fund with a note about deferred maintenance savings. That does not make sense unless someone moved money from another account or someone counted revenue twice." The treasurer sat up. The president took the pages and looked at them. Gloria said, "This is absurd. You are throwing out random accusations to distract from your own violation." I said, "These are not random. They are all part of the same pattern. You backdate notices so residents miss deadlines. You block records requests so they cannot defend themselves. You copy meeting minutes to hide what actually happened. And you move money in ways that do not show up in the audits. Gloria laughed. She said, "You think I am embezzling. That is your big theory." I said, "I do not know if you are embezzling, but I know the numbers do not add up and the records do not match." The president looked at the treasurer and said, "Do we have a copy of the forensic review?" The treasurer said, "What forensic review?" I pulled out the 8-year-old audit summary. I said, "This one." The board voted to implement better controls, and the auditor recommended a full forensic review. There is no record of the review happening. The treasurer took the page and read it. She said, "I was not on the board back then." The president said, "I was. We did the controls, but we never authorized the forensic review because the cost was too high." I said, "The audit found missing receipts and duplicate invoices. If you did not follow up, the problem could still be there." Gloria said, "This is ancient history." The president said, "Maybe we should revisit it." Gloria stood up fast enough that her chair scraped back. She said, "I will not sit here and be accused of fraud by a resident who cannot even follow parking rules." She said, "I have dedicated 7 years to this community, and this is the thanks I get." She said, "I will make an example out of you so everyone learns." A neighbor in the 3rd row gasped. Another said, "She just threatened him." Gloria realized what she had said. She tried to recover. She said, "I meant an example of why rules matter." The president said, "That is not what it sounded like." He looked at me and said, "Do you have anything else?" I said, "Yes." I pulled out my phone and opened the doorbell camera app. I said, "I have video proof that someone moved my car into the guest space the morning of the alleged violation." I played the footage. The room went silent. Everyone watched the figure in the purple jacket get into my car and drive it across the lot. When the video ended, I said, "I will make an example out of you so everyone learns." The president asked who moved the car. I said I did not know, but whoever it was had a key and knew exactly where the guest space cameras were pointed. I said the video also proved the car was legally parked in my assigned space before that, which meant the violation was staged. Gloria said, "That video does not prove anything. It could be edited." I said, "It has metadata and timestamps. I can provide the raw file." A neighbor in the back stood up. She said, "I have something to say." The president nodded. She said, "Gloria pressured me to sign a complaint about a shed on my neighbor's property last year. She said if I did not sign, she would inspect my property next. I signed even though the shed was not violating anything. I felt terrible about it." The room erupted. 3 other people started talking at once. One said Gloria had threatened her with a lien. Another said Gloria told him his fence was non-compliant, even though it matched the original plans. A third said Gloria rejected her board nomination for a missing signature that was not actually missing. The president banged a gavel. He said, "Quiet." Gloria looked at the president. She said, "They are lying. They are all working together to undermine the board." The president said, "That is a serious accusation." Gloria said, "So is embezzlement." The president said, "Nobody accused you of embezzlement. We are just asking questions." Gloria said, "I quit." She grabbed her binder and her phone and walked toward the door. The president said, "You cannot quit in the middle of a meeting." Gloria said, "Watch me." She opened the door. I said one more thing. She stopped. I said, "I submitted a formal complaint to the state regulatory board this morning. I included all the evidence. They are opening an investigation." Gloria turned around slowly. She said, "You did what?" I said, "I filed a complaint. It is public record. You will get a notice in a few days." She said, "You are bluffing." I pulled out the confirmation email and held it up. She stared at it. Then she said, "You just destroyed this community." She walked out. The door slammed. The room exploded again. The president banged the gavel 3 more times. He said, "Meeting adjourned." Everyone started talking and pulling out phones. I sat down and closed the binder. My hands were shaking. A neighbor came up and thanked me. Another said I should run for the board. A third said I should sue. I said I just wanted my car left alone. The treasurer came over. She said she would look into the reserve fund issue and report back. The president said he would call an emergency board meeting to discuss next steps. I said I would be there. He nodded. I walked out into the parking lot. The hazy smoke from the grill drifted past again. 2 neighbors were whispering while pointing at the tow truck. I got in my car and drove home. The next morning, I got an email from the management company. The regional supervisor said Gloria had been removed from all enforcement duties pending the investigation. He said the board voted to pause all active violations until they could be reviewed. He said they were scheduling an independent audit of the last 3 years of financials. He thanked me for bringing the issues to their attention. I forwarded the email to my family member. They called immediately. They said the neighborhood group chat was on fire. People were sharing stories about Gloria going back years. Someone found a post from 5 years ago about a resident who was fined for holiday lights in February, even though the lights had been down since January. Someone else found a complaint about a tow that happened during a board meeting, so the resident could not defend themselves. Someone else found a pattern of proxy votes that all had the same signature. It was unraveling. 3 days later, I got a knock on my door. It was the sheriff deputy from before. He said he had followed up on my report and interviewed Gloria. She claimed she never came by my car that morning. He said he showed her the doorbell video. She said it was edited. He said he had it analyzed and it was not edited. She changed her story and said she moved the car because it was blocking a fire lane. He said there was no fire lane in that part of the lot. She said she was trying to help. He said it looked like vandalism and harassment. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I wanted to wait and see what the HOA investigation found. He said that was my choice, but he was keeping the case open. I thanked him. He left. A week later, the board held the emergency meeting. I showed up with the binder. So did about 30 other residents. The president opened by saying the board had received the preliminary audit results. The auditor found over $15,000 in unexplained fees tied to the enforcement contractor. The contractor was owned by Gloria's brother. Every tow, every violation notice, every inspection had been billed at rates higher than the contract specified. The overcharges had been going on for 2 years. The board voted to cancel the vendor relationship tied to the abuse. They also voted to refund all improper fines from the last year. The president said Gloria had submitted a resignation letter that morning. He read it aloud. It was 2 sentences. It said she was stepping down effective immediately and she would not be making any further comment. The crowd clapped. Someone shouted, "Good riddance." The president said the board was implementing new policies to prevent future abuse. All violation notices would be tracked with certified mail logs. All enforcement actions would require photo evidence uploaded to the portal within 24 hours. All records requests would be fulfilled within 5 business days with no fees. All meeting minutes would be reviewed by the management company before posting. The treasurer said they were also moving to online voting for board elections to prevent proxy fraud. I raised my hand. The president called on me. I said I had one more request. I said the board should release a public summary of the audit findings so residents knew what happened and what was being fixed. The president looked at the treasurer. She nodded. He said they would post it on the portal by the end of the week. I said thank you. The meeting ended. People came up to shake my hand. One woman said I saved the neighborhood. A man said I should write a book. I said I just wanted to park my car in peace. They laughed. I walked out and got in my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my family member. It said, "You are a legend." I sent back a thumbs up. 2 weeks later, the state regulatory board sent a notice. They were opening a formal investigation into Cypress Point Association. They requested all financial records, meeting minutes, and enforcement files going back 5 years. They scheduled interviews with current and former board members, including Gloria. The notice said the investigation could take 6 months. I printed it and added it to the binder. The binder was almost full now. I bought a second one and labeled it Part 2. Then I got another email from the management company. The regional supervisor said they had completed a deeper review of the duplicate minutes. They found that Gloria had been filing template minutes for meetings that were canceled or postponed, then backdating them to make it look like quorum was met. At least 8 meetings over the last 2 years never actually happened. The board was re-voting on every action from those meetings to ensure legitimacy. The supervisor said it was the most brazen records fraud he had seen in 15 years. He said I should consider a career in forensic accounting. I laughed. A month after that, I got a letter from a law firm. It was from the attorney representing 3 former residents who were fined or towed under Gloria's watch. They were filing a class action lawsuit against the HOA and Gloria personally. They wanted to know if I would join as a plaintiff or provide testimony. I called the attorney. She said they had over 20 potential plaintiffs and the case was strong. She said Gloria had no defense because the video and audit results were irrefutable. She said the HOA's insurance would likely settle to avoid trial. I said I would think about it. She said to take my time. I hung up and looked at the binder on my desk. It had started as a way to defend myself, and now it was evidence in a fraud investigation and a lawsuit. I thought about the Hawkins case. I thought about all the people who paid bogus fines just to make it go away. I thought about the neighbors who were too scared to speak up. I opened the laptop and drafted an email to the attorney. I said I would join the case. 3 months later, the HOA insurance company settled. Every plaintiff received a full refund of fines and fees, plus compensation for time and stress. The settlement also required the board to adopt a formal accountability policy and hire an independent compliance officer. Gloria was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The regulatory board issued a formal finding of financial misconduct and procedural abuse. The report was public. I downloaded it and read the whole thing. It confirmed everything I had suspected. Gloria had been running a kickback scheme with her brother's tow company and inflating enforcement stats to justify higher management fees. The scheme netted her about $60,000 over 2 years. The regulatory board referred the case to the county prosecutor. Gloria was charged with fraud and misuse of funds. Her trial was set for the following year. The board held a special meeting to apologize to the community. The president said they had failed in their oversight and they took responsibility. He said they were committed to rebuilding trust. He said the new policies were already in place and working. He opened the floor for comments. A dozen people spoke. Most thanked me by name. One woman cried and said she had been afraid to leave her house because of Gloria's threats. A man said he almost sold his home just to escape the harassment. Another said he stopped coming to meetings because Gloria always shut him down. The president said it was a dark chapter, but the community would recover. He said transparency and accountability were the foundation going forward. The meeting ended with applause. That night, I sat on my porch and looked at the neighborhood. The streetlights were on. A few kids were riding bikes. Someone was grilling again, and the hazy smoke drifted through the warm air. Everything looked normal, but I knew it was not the same. The rules were still there, the HOA was still there, but the fear was gone. People were not afraid to ask questions anymore. They were not afraid to challenge a notice or request a record. They were not afraid of Gloria, because Gloria was gone. I thought about the cold case, the backdated notices, the missing money, the forged paperwork, the staged violations. It had all been hiding in plain sight, buried in templates and binders and fake meetings. It took one reopened case to connect the clues and catch the culprit. It took one person willing to say, "This does not add up." A neighbor walked by and waved. I waved back. She stopped and said, "Thank you for what you did." I said, "I just followed the numbers." She said, "You did more than that. You gave people their voices back." I did not know what to say to that. She smiled and kept walking. I sat there for a while longer. Then I went inside and closed the binder for the last time. I put it on the shelf next to my other records. It sat there like a trophy. Not because I won, but because it was proof that you could win. You could take on a Karen who thought she owned the rules, and you could beat her with nothing but patience, evidence, and a refusal to be quiet. A few weeks later, I ran into the gate vendor technician who had helped explain the access logs during the investigation. He was doing maintenance on the entry system. I thanked him for his help. He said he was glad someone finally stood up to Gloria. He said she had been threatening vendors for years, telling them they would lose the contract if they did not back her up. He said most people just stayed quiet because they needed the work. I said that was how systems like this stayed broken. He nodded. He said, "You know what the funny part is?" I asked what. He said, "Gloria claims she never came by your car that morning and the doorbell video plays." We both laughed. He said it was poetic justice. I agreed. The HOA board called me a few weeks later. They said they were forming a resident advisory committee to help draft the new policies. They wanted to know if I would serve on it. I said yes. The committee met once a month. We rewrote the enforcement guidelines, the records access policy, and the appeals process. We made everything transparent and time-stamped. We required all violation photos to be uploaded within 24 hours. We banned backdating. We required certified mail for all notices. We made the portal logs public. Every change was designed to prevent another Gloria. The board approved everything unanimously. The new policies went into effect at the start of the next quarter. 6 months after the settlement, I got a message from the attorney. She said Gloria had taken a plea deal. She pled guilty to fraud and agreed to pay full restitution to the HOA and all affected residents. She received probation and community service. The prosecutor said jail time was not warranted because she had no prior record and the victims were being made whole. The attorney said it was not the outcome some people wanted, but it was a clear win. Gloria was finished. She could not spin it. She could not claim she was the victim. She could not come back. I said that was good enough for me. I still live in the neighborhood. I still park in my assigned space. I still check the HOA portal every morning, but now it is boring. The notices are on time. The photos are uploaded. The meeting minutes are accurate. The budget reconciliations are public. The enforcement stats are down because people are not being targeted anymore. The vendor contracts are transparent. The board elections are online and fair. It is almost boring how normal it is now. But that is the point. An HOA should be boring. It should be predictable and fair and boring. It should not be a weapon. It should not be a way for one person to control everyone else. It should not be a system where the rules only apply to the people who do not know how to fight back. I learned a lot from this. I learned that you do not need to be a lawyer or an accountant to hold people accountable. You just need to be willing to read the documents, ask the questions, and refuse to accept answers that do not make sense. I learned that most abusers rely on intimidation and complexity to keep people quiet. They count on you giving up because it is easier than fighting. I learned that if you document everything, stay calm, and force them to follow their own rules, they will eventually crack. I learned that most people want to do the right thing, but they need someone to go first. Once you go first, others will follow. I learned that a management audit that exposes the pattern can bring down a tyrant faster than any argument or speech. I learned that the HOA cancels the vendor relationship tied to the abuse when the money trail is undeniable. I learned that Karen is told to step down and she cannot spin it when the evidence is airtight and public. I learned that a funny karma moment, like when Karen claims she never came by and the doorbell video plays, can be the turning point that makes everyone else brave enough to speak up. I hope you enjoyed this HOA drama.